A leaked phone call surfaced online pointing at who might be behind this. The Odessa massacre, where more than 40 anti-Kiev protesters were burned alive, murder, some might call it, a massacre. Ukraine's second richest man and industrial tycoon Ігор'Коломойський has been accused of orchestrating this mass murder. In an intercepted phone call, a former businessman speaks to an unidentified man, and he seems sure of who was behind the violence in Odessa.
У него различия, я не знаю, мне ощущение, что он с ума сошел, честно скажу. Причем полностью подтвержденный фактор, что в Одессе вот этих ребят нанял он полностью. Причем ради того, чтобы установить палец у губернатора. Мне это уже даже в бютовском штабе подтвердили. У них ситуация вышла из-под контроля. Задача была их избить, отмутузить, чтобы их унесли в больницу и полностью уничтожить лагерь.
Camps were destroyed and people were taken to hospitals, but it didn't stop there. A pro-Kiev gang drove federalization supporters into a nearby building and showered it with Molotov cocktails. The building caught on fire. People jumped out of windows desperate to survive, while many others burned inside. Some of those who did manage to get out were beaten by gangs in the crowd below. But let's get back to the phone call. It alleges rich and powerful pro-Kiev Ігор'Коломойський was behind this violence, a bold and brazen accusation. But I still want to give you an idea of who this is. He's an incredibly rich man. Officially, his wealth is estimated at just over $2 billion. But reports suggest it's just a minor part of his real assets. He owns a bank in Ukraine and invests in metal and petroleum. Plus, he's the governor of one of Ukraine's southern regions. He was also accused of financing the neo-Nazi Svoboda Party in Ukraine and pro-Kiev gangs, which were allegedly deployed to suppress protests in the east. Joining me to talk more about who might be running the show in Ukraine is English lecturer and blogger from Ivano-Frankivsk, Paul Vickers. Thanks for being with us. What do you make of these allegations?
Well, I mean, as your own researcher said, that they're not verified, these videos, so we don't exactly know. Well, we don't even know who Oleh is talking to. There's quite a few holes in the two videos. That the Kolomoisky video where he's talking to former presidential candidate and Oleg'Царёв, some of the details don't match. But obviously, you know, they're serious accusations, but we can't prove that they're verifiable yet. And obviously we don't know if Oleh is definitely talking about facts that he's heard or if it's hearsay. So yeah, so obviously it's something that is being discussed, but the details still seem to be thin on the ground.
Another phone call popped up today where Komsomolsky handed out death threats to an anti-Kiev politician. His company was also behind a notorious ad which promoted a $10,000 bounty for pro-Russians. What can you tell us about his reputation?
Well, if you judge by some of the social media responses to Kolomoisky, he's being presented as a national hero in some Western Ukraine and Central Ukraine, or anyone who's deemed pro-Ukrainian. There's memes going around of him as a hero, and they call him Żydo-Banderivec, so the Jewish Banderite. So sort of creating a strange paradox where obviously initially the criticisms of Euromaidan, or the groups that were seen to be supporting its more violent wing, were presented as anti-Semitic, but obviously Kolomoisky is Jewish and very active in promoting Jewish life in Ukraine and around the world. So it's created a kind of strange paradox that the person who is being presented as the greatest hero in Ukraine right now is actually Jewish. So yeah, so that's quite an...
How influential is he, though, in Ukraine?
Cultural phenomenon. Well, I mean, Privatbank, it's not a monopoly, but it might as well be, and that's his bank. You know, my salary goes to Privatbank, my wife's salary goes to Privatbank, everyone I know has their salary through Privatbank. You know, so it's quite influential in terms of through the bank, and that's, I think, how he's most known. So the other businesses, the other businesses are have less of an impact on people's everyday lives. Obviously, he's come into prominence now because he was at the start of when the Ukrainian army was engaged initially, and when the threat to Crimea was emerging. He was the one who was literally fueling the tanks, because he gave some money for the fuel, for the petrol for them. So he's coming to prominence now, but he's not a frontline political oligarch in the sense of sort of a Petro Poroshenko kind of figure who is involved in parliament. Now he's come to the fore as more of a frontline politician, because obviously he's been made the governor of Dnipropetrovsk, so that's his sort of overt entry into the political life. But obviously, in any post-Soviet economy, the oligarchs obviously have extreme political influence. So
right, and another oligarch is actually running for presidency. He's been actively supporting the government in Kiev, the interim government. He's supported by the West. Is that what the peaceful protesters who started the movement on Maidan really wanted?
Well, there have been calls for a third Maidan if the oligarchs continue to win out. You're obviously referring to Petro Poroshenko, or the Chocolate King, who has quite strained relations with Russia. I don't know what the status of his chocolates are at the moment, whether they've been banned from import to Russia again or not. I imagine so. He's running away with the presidential election at the moment, in the opinion polls at least. Well, he came to town. He came to Ivano-Frankivsk on the 2nd of May, which was obviously national holiday, and that was the most people who'd been out on the streets again since Euromaidan, and he kind of put on a show. Lutsenko, sort of the former associate of Yulia Tymoshenko, is siding with Poroshenko now, and he sort of tried to appeal to the people of Ivano-Frankivsk when I saw him speak that actually Poroshenko isn't an oligarch. He might have a couple of $1 billion, but he's not a real oligarch. He's not one of them. So they're trying to frame him as a kind of man of the people, but I don't know. There doesn't seem to be great enthusiasm from the people that I know towards him. Just a kind of inevitability that probably out of the people who are standing, he's the least bad of the bunch. So, and obviously another aspect of it is he's rich. Probably he doesn't need to steal from the people of Ukraine as much as maybe previous incumbents. So that's another positive, a plus mark for him.
Paul Vickers speaking to us from Ivano-Frankivsk, a blogger and lecturer. Thank you so much for being in the Now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Greg Butterfield, contributing editor for Workers.org, he joins me in the Now Live. Let's get his take. He's in touch with some Ukrainian activists that have been writing extensively on the Odessa massacre. Should we try to search for any hidden plot behind this massacre? In other words, do you think that it was orchestrated?
I definitely think it was orchestrated at the highest levels, and not just among the oligarchy in Ukraine, but by the United States government and U.S. big business, who we know now, thanks to reports in the German media, and as many of us had previously suspected, the CIA and FBI are deeply entrenched, working side by side with the junta in Kiev, plotting out how best to go about destroying and undermining the resistance movement in the southeast. Just a historical something that has historically happened under U.S. auspices over many, many years, from Indonesia to Chile to Yugoslavia to Syria, and now, unfortunately, in Ukraine as well.
Since the start of the Ukraine crisis, there's been a bunch of leaked phone calls. As far as I understand, this one we have today was leaked by former intelligence officers who have dedicated themselves to the movements in eastern Ukraine. Are leaked phone calls becoming a tool here?
Well, they've definitely been a very big contribution to exposing what's really going on. In the past, we might have had to wait for years for information like this to come forward. Now, thanks to social media and thanks to the internet, whistleblowers are able to get this information out into the hands of activists very quickly, and that's really helpful for us in terms of exposing what's going on.
Who do you think is more powerful here? Yatsenyuk and his team, who meet with officials in Europe and the U.S. strongly behind them, or the Ukrainian oligarchs?
I think both of them are working, they're different hands of what the U.S. is trying to do in Ukraine. The oligarchy are big fish in the small pond of Ukraine, but ultimately they're tools of what the U.S. goal is, just as Yatsenyuk and the neoliberal wing in the government are, just as the European Union governments and Merkel are finding out that they are. Ultimately, the U.S. is pushing the buttons, is egging on the most extreme fascist, racist elements, like those behind the Odessa massacre, to really try to strangle Russia and strangle the resistance in the southeast.
There's been massive responses to this leak in Russia for obvious reasons. Are we going to see any sort of response in the West or in Europe?
I think everything is contributing in Europe. The first big break we kind of saw was immediately after the massacre in Odessa, when Bild on Sonntag in Germany revealed this information about the U.S. intelligence forces working in Kiev. And I think we're going to see more leaks, more information like that coming out in Western Europe. In the U.S., not so much, at least right away, because here there's a real powerful united front among the Democrats and Republicans and all those politicians representing Wall Street who really are all in on this campaign against the people of Ukraine and against Russia.
All right, Greg Butterfield,
we're doing our
editor.
best to expose it.
And that's great. Thanks for that. Contributing editor to workers.org, Greg Butterfield. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.